Dear people of the Southern Cameroons, fellow Ambazonia, brave warriors of our liberation movement, accept revolutionary greetings from me, John Ba Akuro. Today is Saturday, this is November 13th, yet another edition of our program, The Soul of the Southern Cameroons. On today's program, we are going to examine a very important concept. In fact, two concepts. I know we have interchangeably used the words plebiscite and a referendum, and we think that one is the same like the other. These are completely different. And the difference, therefore, in these concepts directly impacts the situation in the southern Cameroons. That is why you will notice that the puzzle has gone through the minds of a lot of people as to why we would have voted on February 11 in a plebiscite that we will join La République du Cameroun upon independence, and thereafter the United Nations on April 21, 1961, went ahead to hold a formal vote for the independence of the Southern Cameroons. And people ask themselves this question: why did this vote not come before the plebiscite? And so this is something that we need clarifications on. And so to do that today, I have as guest a gentleman who has demonstrated beyond reasonable doubt that he has a mastery of the history of the Southern Cameroons. And his name, Dr. Richard Tanto Ndi. He is a consultant on conflict resolutions and is based in Boston, Massachusetts. Hello, Dr. Ndi. Good afternoon and welcome to the soul of the Southern Cameroons. How are you doing today?
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to this program. I'm doing quite well, and
Okay.
I'm happy to be part of your program.
How is it out there in Boston? Cold or
Well, it's
mild?
it's becoming cold. It's becoming cold. We have temperatures of about 40 right now, so it's getting cold, and it might be a little colder by evening. By maybe 6 p.m., we'll be getting down to 30. So it's getting quite cold out here.
I want to thank you sincerely for accepting to be part of this program. And I know you're a very busy person. It's not easy, but you chose to spend some time with us on this program. So while you hold your peace for a moment, I'd like us to delve quickly into some of the events that marked the week. And actually, there's one key one, and that key one has to do with, the brutal end to the life of one of our daughters, our little angels, Tato Brandy, in Bamenda yesterday by Mr. Paul Bia's talks. Yet again, I should say, even right on to this moment, I'm still really to come to terms to the fact that these things continue, come to terms with the fact that these things continue to happen. Yet, the international community is silent. We're yet to get real action, very strong statements calling out Mr. Paul Biya. They're not coming yet. No, the world appears to give the impression that Mr. Paul Biya is not only above his national laws, but that he is also above international law. So, my dear people of the Southern Cameroons and fellow citizens of the world who are watching this program, uh, let's listen to what the colonial governor, Paul Biya's representative, his colonial representative in the southern Cameroon, said after this incident? Well, I'm afraid the technical department rather gave us the people expressing their frustration and disappointment to the fact that because of the chase of a bribe note of 500 CFA francs, literally less than $1. I mean, less than $1. This policeman decided to brutally end the life of a little girl whose mother had run away from this same talks of Mr. Biya income and came into Bamenda thinking that she was running away from death, only to meet it. Dr. Richard Ndii, I know you had the opportunity to, watch some of the videos on social media and hear what people said here and there. What is your comment on this tragic incident?
Thank you very much. These incidents are really heartbreaking, and I feel very bad, more because I'm in Cameroon and I've invested about 20 years trying to see that we build peace in Cameroon. And when I see all of this, it gives me the impression that all of that time that I invested in working towards building peace, trying to, work with people on how they could resolve their conflicts, trying to get into issues which would prevent the advent of conflict, that's preventive diplomacy, and doing all of that has been wasted. And so you can imagine that somebody who has invested so much of his time to building peace begins to see these images every single day of people on the streets, of children who are killed, people who are dying because of the inability of leadership to sit around a table and discuss and find solutions to genuine problems that the people are facing. And my concept of leadership is that a good leader is somebody who listens to the people he is ruling, he is governing, he is trying to lead. He listens to them, he understands their problems, he talks with them, and then uses or is informed by what he gets from them to develop policy and to build a country where people would feel, as part and parcel, people will feel confident, people will feel secure in it. And so when I see all of this, it tells me that, all of that time that I invested in trying to work with people was just wasted. And in Cameroon, we were in Cameroon together. I invested time in building what you call good governance. I had been part of the follow-up committee for public investment budget. I had been part of the transparency initiative, in Cameroon, and we fought very hard to qualify Cameroon as a transparent country in the extractive sector. And we were fighting a very serious battle to make Cameroonian elections credible. Those are aspects of, those are things that we did in order to build that country so that we don't come into situations like what we're living today. And
Dr.
so it's very unfortunate. I feel very bad
let
about
me
it.
let me interrupt you briefly there. I want to find out from you. You've noticed that this incident comes after the brutal killing of Bebe Caro Louise in Boya, and it also follows, the explosion of an IED at the University of Boya in Amphi 600. Would we say this has become a pattern, and that perhaps the government is deliberately, the colonial administration is deliberately targeting school-going children?
Um, I would say, you know, it's a terrible situation that we can begin to, have children die because of issues that we could handle. It's unfortunate to have children die in issues that we could handle without losing a single life. And so it is really painful to see little children who are innocent, who don't even know how this thing started, die because of a conflict which could be resolved, and people live peacefully, live happily, their daily lives without any difficulties. So I feel really, really bad that we see these images and they continue to come, which means that we don't learn from what has been happening. I mean, people were streets in Buya. Little did one expect that in Bamenda, the same kind of thing would happen and move people to this. And this is happening at a time when we are, clamor that children should get back to school. You see, we are clamoring that children get back to school. Parents are taking their children to school, and then on the way they die without even reaching school. So it really contradicts what some of the things that we want to preach and want to say. So, what is the security our children have for going back to school? They were shot in uniform. They were shot going to school. So it really is unfortunate that we are getting through this.
Yeah, I think I even skipped one incident or two even, because the one in Gabu, although the children were not at school, but I mean they were school children whose lives were brutally ended at their homes, and also the situation as the Mother Francisca International Bilingual Academy in Kumba. Now you see the net consequence of this series of dark events on children and students. I mean, going to school in the southern Cameroons has become, or I mean, is an announcement by one of the groups in our liberation movement that they intend to shut down schools in the entire southern Cameroons. Would you say that's a fair response to this situation? That's a good answer?
Um, it's it's a difficult situation we're into because our people want children to go back to school so that they are not victims of a situation which they did not create, so that they are not victims because they are innocent. But then there is the fear that they might not even end up reaching school because of the insecurity situation. So to me, the priority would have been to see how to address the fundamental causes of this problem. And I think if discussions were to focus on the fundamental issues that underlie this problem, the other issue of people going to school and the insecurity around schools would be solved. So my impression or my belief is that we are addressing the wrong problem at the moment. We should tackle the root causes, and then the leaves, which are schools and the problems associated with schools, would naturally just be solved. And I remember talking to some program, and I was informed that that program I was addressing directly to the president of Cameroon, and I said Cameroonians needed just to have a program drawn out saying, let our children go back to school. We will sit. Let's give ourselves 2 months to, constitute the delegations that would come and sit and discuss on these things and solve our problem. We would not have been here if we did that. And the fact that,
I
you see, that is exactly what would have happened. We wouldn't have been here. But the problem is the system sees schools as a soft target to use to drum up support for illegality, because they should address the issues as they are. The issues that led to what we are today, or to where we are today, were fundamental issues. Those are pending and they have not been addressed. So if we begin to address the consequences and we leave the real substantive issues, then we're probably running very fast in the wrong direction.
okay,
Let's
Dr.
focus on
D.
those issues and then we can have the other bits really just solved.
Okay, Dr. D, thank you very much. We will move on. I remember hearing the colonial governor, Lele L'Afrique Adolphe Deben Chofo, saying that the government will investigate, and if the ammunition or the bullet after an autopsy found in the child is that of the policeman concerned, because he's already been arrested, then the man will be punished. But on top of that, he said his government was going to offer a befitting burial to our daughter, as if the people wanted something to happen to their child so that she can have a befitting burial. So embarrassing. The level to which these people see our lives, the level to which they have ceased to value human life just because we are Southern Cameroonians. This Reverend Father, take a look at this.
Now, father, this way one come go see the grave site for place where they bury the picking with Abdul Karim. So I cried out people than that. The ones in where they want struggle, and cooks and a small fufu, oh they cried out. Now, father, this way one come go see the
So when you listen to the gentleman speaking in that video in broken English or in pidgin, you understand that the child has already been buried, just like it happened to Bebe Carol Louis. Where is that decent burial? What is this whole nonsense about decent burial when all the children need is to be alive, to pursue their dreams, to live in a free and independent Southern Cameroons without the intrusion of a raucous neighbor called La République du Cameroon? I subscribe fully to what Comrade Abdul Karim Ali said yesterday at the scene. And I want to personally, particularly congratulate Comrade Abdul Karim for rising to the occasion and providing leadership at a time it was most needed on Ground Zero. Comrade Abdul Karim, accept my pat on your back, comrade. You did so well. But most importantly, I subscribe 100% to what you said. Just listen.
From God we came, and to God is our return. Make some person know should we begin. Should we go at the inside things say get our power. That begin don't die now because God don't live up. But it is a coward who leaves the adult in battle to shoot at infants. It is the loser and the invader who kills innocent children coming back from school. 500 francs. Francophone children commit murder in school. They do gang sex in school. They stab at other students in schools. They attack their own teachers in schools. Southern Cameroonians have not done this. Yet, they have not been fired by their own bullets. People are shot for one reason. Because they are Southern Cameroonians. Cool stop.
That was Abdul Karim Ali. And in case you don't recognize the gentleman who was with the Reverend Father, going to console the family of baby Tato Brandy in the compound there after she was lowered, is still Comrade Abdul Karim. Dr. Ndi, I'm coming back to you. You listened to Abdul Karim. I'd like you to, make a comment. What is your take on what he said? Do you agree with him, or you think perhaps that there is another explanation that can be given to this kind of situation? I'm sorry, Dr. Ndi, if you are talking, we're not getting you. You appear to be muted.
Oh, thank you very much. What I'm saying is, I subscribe to what he is saying because he is speaking the truth. And the truth should be spoken. And it's only the truth that would set us free. He's speaking the truth because that is the feeling you get when you feel that you are completely ignored, or nobody or your leadership doesn't cater for your well-being. That is how far it can go. And I think if you read the history of Southern Cameroon, you would see that there have been these kind of frustrations to a point where the people no longer believe that anything good can come from, the government. And that is where people are now. And that is why what is happening, we see it as a total abandonment of a people who are supposed to be protected by that system which is killing them. So it is unfortunate that is happening, and I subscribe very much to what Karim said, because that is the truth, and it's only the truth that would set us free. Life, God created life. Nobody can create life, and so why should we kill when we cannot create what we cannot create? Why should we kill life or create life? So it's really, really heartbreaking that we keep losing lives for something that people should sit on the table, because no matter what, in the very end, people would come to sit around the same table to talk things out.
And while this is going on, those who pretentiously or call themselves our elite, those CPDM so-called elites in Yaoundé, never ever raised a little finger. I'm surprised. Maybe I'm naive by saying I'm surprised, but I wonder if there is some, should I say, an embargo on them ever making a statement about the evil treatment being meted on the people they purport to represent. What is your take on that too?
I don't think they people in the Northwest and Southwest. I don't think they represent them, because the people in a majority, and this has been proven, opt and are opting for a change in what is happening in the country. And these people are not ready for that change, which is people are. How can you be representing a people and you don't represent what they stand for? So I don't think they represent the people of these two regions. I don't think so. So they are probably there on their own, and I regret to say they don't represent the people, because the people have made their point very clear, but this point is not being carried by those who say they are representing them, where decisions are taken. So how do they claim that they are representing them? I don't see it.
Well, your viewpoint is shared by Okalia Bilaye Bernard, who is the colonial governor of the Southwest, as they call it in their nomenclature. But on this program, we refer to this as the Southern Cameroons, because this is the historical construct that we are going to be talking about, the Southern Cameroons. The Northwest, Southwest is a colonial appellation that La République du Cameroun has been trying to force on our people. And that is why I'm saying this gentleman, Okalia Bilaye Bernard, I don't even know if he's a gentleman or I say gentleman. Okalia Bilaye Bernard, as you see on the Guardian post, you see Okalia Bilaye Bernard tiptoes into Ndian, threatens to sack absentee MPs and mayors. This is why I say, Dr. Ndi, that Okalia Bilaye Bernard supports the statement you just made. Because when an unelected, be it governor, threatens to sack supposedly elected representatives, that tells you exactly what the situation is. That tells me, and at least vindicates me and all Southern Cameroonians who have reminded the world over and over that we don't have any elected persons in the southern Cameroons, at least with effect from 2020. It started in 2018 when Mr. Paul Biya's election, or rather his self-reappointment as president, was carried out without our people participating. In 2020 and on the 9th of February, when they said they were conducting elections, our people boycotted to the point where even the Colonial Cameroon's election organizing body recognized that less than 5% of the people participated. And we know that the true figures are that less than 2%. And that those who even voted were soldiers, gendarmes, police, and civil servants on mission, along with some of this so-called CPDM elite who came in armored cars. Those were the only people. And this tells you, therefore, that Okalia Bilai Bernard is aware of this situation, and he knows that all those who call themselves MPs, mayors in the southern Cameroons are actually government appointees. That is why, as a representative of the head of state, he can threaten to fire them. This is exactly what it is. Dr. Ndi, I know you want to say something with respect to that. Permit me laugh because this situation is, is kind of laughable. So I don't know what your comment is on this.
Yes, I want to. If you represent a people, you should carry the aspirations of those people to wherever you are representing them. If you don't carry the aspirations of those people to where you are representing them, then you don't represent them. And that is exactly what is happening in the situation in Cameroon. Those who are calling themselves representing people, they are not representing them because they don't carry the message from those people to where they go to represent them. And they are not even given room to say anything if they were even to say. They are not given room to express themselves. So they are up, and so they should not claim to represent anybody but themselves.
And Dr. Ndi, I learned this morning before coming to, while I was preparing for this broadcast, that O.C. Joshua, who is the vice president of the Social Democratic Front, the opposition, SDF, that he is asking the government to authorize the parliament of that country to talk about the situation in the southern Cameroons. How laughable.
Well, it's surprising that it's coming from somebody I used to feel was, learned enough and who had the legal argument to present or to carry the voices or the wishes of the people to Parliament. It's unfortunate that it's coming from somebody like that because Parliament represents people. That is the only institution where the people presented and their aspirations can be brought to the knowledge of even the executive. They have the mandate to carry the aspirations of their people and discuss these aspirations and inform policy and inform laws about what is happening in their constituencies. That is the basis of law, so that law reflects what the people are living on the ground. So if you have an institution like that one,
yes, I was saying that such a request as his brings to the fore the fact that there's generally this issue of the separation of powers between the various arms of government. So it confirms what we have said from time immemorial, that the people of the southern Cameroons cannot stay in a union with a people who don't even recognize how government is run. For a member of parliament to be saying they want authorization from the executive arm of government to discuss an issue in parliament, this is strange, don't you think?
Normally, the executive should be informed by issues that are deliberated in parliament. That is the normal process. Issues are deliberated in parliament and then they are brought up, rather than listening to the executive to dictate what it wants to do to parliament. Parliament is where every Cameroonian should be represented. and every voice should be heard, and all the concerns of people should be heard, and some of these concerns can be transformed into policy, into issues of law, so that we have a situation of sustainable peace in the country. So Parliament should do its job of informing the executive about what is happening on the ground. The executive has very little touch with the grassroots, but Parliament does have. I mean, well, if it's representing the people, and if the people who are so elected stay within their constituencies, carry the messages from their constituencies to Parliament.
Well, you would definitely not expect them to do the kind of thing that you are saying if they don't even recognize their role, if they don't even know what they represent, if they don't even know that they are a separate arm of government from the executive, and that they should not be dictated upon by the executive.
The executive. That I think that is it. There are three arms. We are even adding the fourth arm, which is the press. We have the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary, and then we include the press, wherein you have like these civil society organizations and all of that coming into play. These are separate institutions, and they help to check themselves, to check each other, so that we have justice, one kind of one unit show. And in Cameroon, it is exemplified because it's exemplified in Cameroon because the executive dictates to all of the other units.
Exactly. You just said something about justice, and that's why I wanted to say even the legislative arm is in the hands of the executive. That is why, I mean, at will, they can capture the people of the Southern Cameroons from the Southern Cameroons, kidnap them, take them over to La République du Cameroun to be tried in a system that they don't understand, to be tried in a system completely different from the system where the offenses were supposedly committed, and then to have them tried in a language that they don't even understand. And this is always said is at the behest or following the instructions of the executive. I
think these are issues that were even raised before this conflict became violent. These are issues that were brought and they were articulated. They were understood. I think every normal Cameroonian would have understood that these were the issues, and these issues needed to be addressed, because people, a part of Cameroon, had felt, marginalized, neglected, subjected, and was just expressing what was happening to it. It's just like I wear my shoe and I tell you it's painful, and you tell me, no, your shoe is not painful on your foot. I'm wearing the shoe and I know where it pinches. And so I express myself, and I intend that you should listen to me, and then we discuss on how these things can happen.
Yeah,
that is the process that leadership takes.
Dr. D, I have a little surprise for you. I know you will be quite surprised to get this, because like you said, some time ago, I had the opportunity to sit with you on a panel at the CRTV. That was a press hour. And I think I left in the first part of that panel, and you continued with Professor Emmanuel Anyambot. And at that time, we were just looking at the situation in the country then, because this was 2016. This is just when the lawyers and teachers were rising. And I recall that we were all worried that the people who ought to be standing tall and talking were rather claiming that there was no problem. But at least there was one clergyman who stood tall with us, and I recall, because you definitely see yourself in this broadcast. So let's take a little watch. Let's go back down memory lane.
To me, as a clergy, and as one who comes from the English-speaking part of this nation, to say there's not an Anglophone problem, I will not be doing justice to my conscience. There is an Anglophone problem in this country. The fact that somebody does not speak English, who is in Bamenda, or does not speak French, who is in Yaoundé, doesn't mean that the linguistic barrier defines that I don't have a problem as an Anglophone. I may not have as an individual, but as a people, we do have a problem as Anglophones. We've just talked about a GCE board. Let us look back into history. I was here already as a pastor. how it was created. Cameroonians of English expression expressed the wish that the GCE board be created to be managed by experts who will run it as a board, not to be run by a ministry. And they wrote a memorandum to be handed over to the Minister of Secondary Education before going to work. They left that morning to hand over the memorandum, and they were sprayed with water. A young man I can never forget lost his eye. He is now of blessed memory. And later on, the GCE board was created, but only after the back board was created, which was not even requested. To me, as a clergy,
as you can see, or you hear the Professor Emmanuel, or Reverend Professor Emmanuel Anyambod, articulating this issue. This is in 2016. I bring this excerpts here so that those who perhaps are just getting into this movement now should understand that it is not a matter of today. That we didn't just get up one morning and get to the point where we say independence or resistance forever. That we had gone through all manners of approach to try and forge a kind of living together with La République du Cameroun, but it never worked. That nothing good that we even managed to obtain ever came without a fight. I'd like to hear your comment regarding this particular outing.
Thank you very much for bringing up that program and for what Reverend Pastor Anyambod spoke about on that program. I happened to on that program on this, and the intervention of the minister who said there was no Anglophone problem came after much, because I came into that program as a historian and somebody who had a mastery of the history of the Southern Cameroons, so that I inform with that history what was happening, so that we're able to learn from history. That was my objective in that program. So I presented the problem of the problem that English-speaking Cameroonians were expressing from the very, early years of the 60s. So I presented those problems, and I said, English-speaking Cameroonians have most of the time been accommodating, because whenever they bring up a problem, these problems are never solved. In 1961, as early as 1961, issues were already being raised with regards to the connection with, East Cameroon, as early as 1961, because there were issues that came up in the KNDP, which were serious, which were debated. And the KNDP started feeling already being marginalized, because when it came up to 1961, 1964, they already saw themselves not being able to contribute even a single idea which is taken over by the central government, by the federal government. And so they asked themselves, why are we in a system where we cannot even voice what we want? They started asking those questions as far back as 1961. And they started also asking questions with regards to the imposition of an inspectorate, or an inspector who was responsible, who was directly, accountable to the president. Why they should have a prime minister, and then there is a state inspector who comes and who reports to the president, and who is having more powers than them when they were in a federation. So they started asking these questions as early as 1961. And in 2016, it was only a culmination. And I was saying, a people were there from 1954. They were self-governing. They had a quasi-federal government. So for 7 years, they were governing themselves with the prime minister. They had parliamentary democracy. Elections were organized peacefully and freely, and power changed hands in Southern Cameroon. And all of that was taken away in the twinkle of an eye. So how would you want people who are used to that form of government to just, surrender that and be captured or be subjected as such? At least they wanted a situation where their voices would be heard, which is important. Their economy was completely ransacked. Everything was moved from the Southern Cameroons to East Cameroon, and that completely killed the economy of Southern Cameroons. And they were already talking about it. They said, we can't, be in a system where we cannot do anything. We are completely helpless. We don't have a voice in this system. And they tried to appeal. They tried to, write letters of petition to say we are not comfortable at this rate. At the rate at which things are going, we are not comfortable. But of course, nothing happened, and they continued to accommodate because they loved peace. They felt that at some point in time, at least the leadership would be sensitive enough to address these concerns that we brought up.
And that point never came.
Unfortunately, these concerns were not being addressed. And, we often say that, when you bottle up somebody for a long time, he explodes. And that is exactly what we have seen. Take a little child and, just take a little child of 2 years. If the little child wants attention and you don't give it, the little child knows that he cannot find you, but he will try to kick you in order for you to pay attention to him or her, to let you know that I need your attention. And that is exactly what the English-speaking part of this country was doing. Of course, nobody listened to them. And of course, it culminated into what, it kind of burst out like magma. And it's becoming difficult for that system to control something that should have been controlled systematically from the 60s. If these issues raised were being addressed as they were raised, I don't think we'd be here today.
Now, Dr. Ndi, well, I'm just seeing an audience from, a comment from an audience member, one of our viewers. He's saying, can you try to remind your guests that we are not English people of Cameroon, that we are Southern Cameroonians or Ambazonians? Well, I'm also seeing a comment saying, but what is happening that the program started late today? I must apologize. I'm sorry. We actually were trying to ensure that the technical conditions of our program will be the best. And I think that has been taken care of. We're sorry for the late start, but I think henceforth we will continue to be on time. And of course, I believe that the technical conditions today are way better. And I apologize for what happened yesterday during the broadcast on the situation that was prevailing in Bamenda. Dr. Ndi, we will move into the VIF of our program today. So we take a brief interlude, and when we come back, we will be talking about the difference between a plebiscite and a referendum, and how this affects the history of the people of the Southern Cameroons. Just hang on. Welcome back to The Soul of the Southern Cameroons, verse 5. And today's field edition, like I said, focus is on the understanding of two key concepts, or referendum and plebiscite. Are they the same? Is there a difference? If yes, I'd like you to so quickly tell our people what you consider to be the difference between a referendum and a plebiscite.
Yes, before I get to that, let me just clarify the listener who kind of said, he did not understand my, probably I want to play on this program. I want to say, if you read about me, the name or the title I gave to myself, I have been working for not less than 20 years as a mediator in conflict, as a conflict management expert. And I worked in that capacity in Cameroon. And I continue to work in that capacity. So I'm not on this program to say I am for this or that. I am here to present the facts that history has registered. And these facts inform where we are and why we are. Those are the facts that I'm trying to present. So that, you know, any person who wants to come into it should know that these are the facts which should be considered if we want to solve the problem in Southern Cameroon. I have invested so much time in trying to give my voice so that this problem is solved, so that we are not where we are. And I feel that for me to be able to do that, I mean, conveniently and freely, I should stand in a position to appeal to both parties who need to come to the table to sit and talk, and to inform both parties of the alternatives that, you know, are evident, and the alternatives and the best case scenario and the worst case scenario with regards to resolving conflicts. That is what I am trying to do here, to present those facts so that people who don't know should understand that these are the facts, because we all need this problem to be solved. It can be solved in different ways. It can be solved by people saying, okay, it is no use trying to, you know, live together when we cannot really live together. Or it can be solved by way of trying to put safeguards so that we live conveniently and people have the same space and the same, you know, rights within a system. Those are ways of solving a problem. So I appeal to all, because if I appeal to all who have a listening, to know that these are the facts which, if we are sitting on the table, we should be bringing to the table. Those are the facts I'm trying to bring out so that we know. Now, coming to your question, we had a plebiscite in Cameroon, and that plebiscite, the plebiscite, like you had said earlier, was kind of to empower the leadership of Cameroons to discuss with the leadership of East Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon, before, you know, before their independence in one. So that plebiscite was really to empower the people of Southern Cameroon so that they talk and shit. This is because with the Nigerian connection, Nigeria had presented the kind of rights Southern Cameroonians or Southern Cameroonians would get when they get into Nigeria. They already said if Southern Cameroons was to get into Nigeria, it would become a state. I mean, it will be not just a quasi-federal state, but it will become a full state of its own. And then Northern Nigeria was already given a status that if they were to vote to go to Nigeria, they would get into a full status. But then the Republic of Cameroon had not offered that kind of opportunity. So the plebiscite was intended to empower the leaders of Southern Cameroon to negotiate with the people of La Republique of the Republic of Cameroon, or East Cameroon as they were later called after the discussions, so that, you know, they discuss on these issues and get equitable conditions, so that, you know, federation should represent the interest of all who were part of that federation. So that is to my mind the reason for the plebiscite of 11th of February. That, to my mind, is the reason why we had that plebiscite. So it empowered the leaders like Foncha, like Endele, and the rest of them to be able to discuss the terms of the kind of government they will get into when they get to La Republique of Cameroon, because La Republique had not prepared anything.
Oh, you are saying that they were being empowered to go negotiate a treaty of union. A treaty of union. That is what they were going to do. Definitely have spelled out, I mean,
yes,
the conditions of the union, of how they are coming in, how to live together, and how they could also end the union in the event that
they were empowered to do
that it did not meet the aspirations of the people.
It did not meet to an extent. When they met in Bamenda, because they met in Bamenda before going to Mfumba, they kind of had something like a program, and they thought that with their points they had, which guaranteed how they would want to get into the union, they would get to Mfumba and they would discuss with the other party, which would also bring their own points. But when they got to Mfumban, what happened? They saw that the other party had a constitution, a constitution which was already there. And so there was nothing like negotiating the terms. What happened in Mfumban was that the constitution of the Republic of Cameroon was amended. And the question has been, why did they accept that amendment? I want to say that the pressure on the leaders of Southern Cameroon was very high. There was a lot of pressure on them because the UN had already said by October 1st, we are going to, we are going to leave Cameroon.
That we are going to achieve independence. That the
we are going to achieve independence, and when you achieve independence, we are leaving. They didn't want to stay beyond October 1st in Cameroon. And so the leadership saw a danger if they didn't talk to a point of agreement. Yet they didn't even really agree. They agreed in principle, but some of these things were carried to Yaoundé. And that constitution that was eventually adopted, the representatives of Southern Cameroon were not there. It was adopted by the parliament in La République of Cameroon, in the absence of, Southern Cameroons.
Well, I think, Dr. Ndi, we will definitely come back to the intricacies of that particular incident. So I just want us to go back a little bit to the concepts. So you've just talked there about, this plebiscite, but what is the intrinsic difference between a plebiscite and a referendum? Is there a clear-cut difference?
Well, there's very, very, I would say, they're like two parts of the same coin in a way. But what I'm saying is, what is important about a plebiscite is who is really at the, who proposes, whose interest does a plebiscite represent? If you see the case of 11th of February, it was the UN that proposed the two options. But before this, it had become clear that Southern Cameroonians wanted self-government. They wanted to be independent. They didn't want to go to Nigeria. They didn't want to go to French Cameroon. They wanted to stay as a separate government. Unfortunately, their ideas, their views were not taken into consideration because of international politics at the time. And I can bring to you some of those issues that militated against the accept that Southern Cameroon should stand on its own as an independent state. First, that period was marked by the Cold War. And by that Cold War, the West, which is capitalist, was fighting against the East, which was communist. And the UN feared, because the UN was largely capitalist, feared that if Southern Cameroon was allowed to acquire independence as a state of its own, it might turn communist. And why were they thinking in that way? Because when independence, when Republic of Cameroon acquired independence in 1960, the war on, there was a nationalist war that was going on. The UPC was very active and they cracked down on the UPC. Many UPC militants left and came down to Southern Cameroon. So they felt that the fact that Southern Cameroonians were hosting or kept UPC members in Southern Cameroon meant that they were sympathetic to the cause of communists. And so they wouldn't want to allow a situation where, Southern Cameroon will become a communist state. And that's why they refused to give them the option and rather forced Southern Cameroon to choose between two options which were not popular to Southern Cameroonians at the time. So that is basically why those two options came in. And the third option, which was the popular option, did not feature. And so the leaders were then forced into options that they did not really want. So and they had to campaign on those options.
Okay, so going back to the concept, I was just looking at some documentation here, where I understand that a plebiscite usually is called by the government, and it's never generally called by the people, because it is called by the government for a specific reason, and too often it is to get some kind of legitimacy for a particular kind of action, a particular line of action or plan. And so the plebiscite generally sometimes is even not enforceable. It may not even be enforceable. And so this informs that the result of the plebiscite in the southern Cameroons in themselves did not mean absolutely that the people had voted to join La République du Cameroun. Because the people were voting to empower the government of Ndeli at the time, of Prime Minister Ndeli, to go negotiate a treaty of union. But you notice that on basis of the results of this plebiscite, our people were told that they had voted simply already to join La République du Cameroun. And this brings me again to the notion of the referendum. Because I note here that a referendum, on the other hand, is a provision that permits the voters to either accept or reject a policy question. I mean, and this will be in a public election. So if it were a referendum in 1961, we would say, obviously, we officially determined by a huge majority to join La République du Cameroun. But it was a plebiscite. And that is why after that plebiscite, in April, and on the 21st of April, that's April 21, 1961, the United Nations went on to vote for the independence of the southern Cameroons because the Frontier government needed to be independent in order to use the legitimacy conferred upon it by the people of the southern Cameroon in a plebiscite to negotiate a treaty of union with the already independent Republic of Cameroon. Is this the same vision we are having on this notion, Doctor?
Yes, I think it's the same. It's the same meaning we're giving to it. Like I said, it was proposed by the UN, right? So that it should empower, so that the leadership of Southern Cameroon should already begin to think about the kind of treaty that they would get into, because they had expressed the need to go towards La République. So it was kind of empowering them to think about it, and they had several meetings in that direction to reflect on the kind of union treaty they would negotiate. And that's why when they were coming, they came with points, they came with arguments concerning the kind of union that they wanted to get into. But like I said, that empowerment met from the other side, which already had a complete constitution, which was there, and they just provided it. And so I'm saying, although they were being empowered to do that, they were empowered to go argue about something they had not even, which was not part and parcel of their original, thinking. They had manifested clearly. They had said Nigeria would be like getting into the sea, and French Cameroon would be like getting into fire, lake of fire. They had expressed that clearly, and that they wanted to stay on their own. Though the plebiscite question came and they had no choice but to follow the plebiscite question and to now get ready to negotiate the Treaty of Union with the other state with which they were going to join. And they were going to.
You and I know, I'm sorry to interrupt you there, but you and I know that in the end, a Treaty of Union was never negotiated. So
it wasn't.
It wasn't negotiated. Therefore, so this simply means that what happened to the southern Cameroons after the British left was a kind of rape.
No, there was no negotiation, because they came to Fumban to negotiate. And eventually, Fumban ended without really having anything. And finally, it was in Yaoundé that whatever was called a kind of compromise was signed without even them. And the British were not part of this process. They didn't empower. And so one of the worries I have is the UN had said the trusteeship was to prepare these people for independence. Why is it that they were not able to accept that these people become independent? Why were they forcing them with two options which were not options that originally the people wanted? Because those options for which they were voting were not options that they wanted. So what I'm saying is that treaty was never really negotiated.
But doctor,
And
if I go by, yeah, if I go by what Ambassador Zablosky of the United States of
yes,
America at the time said, he said that was in 1961. Yeah, he said
yes,
the government of the United States of America was extending its warm congratulations to the people of the Southern Cameroons on attaining self-determination, and went ahead to indicate that forcing the people into a union with, with a people with a different culture and background from theirs was going to be like sowing seeds of future discord. Already, this statement confirms what most say, that when Dr. John Gould Foncha of blessed memory and Solomon Tandem Munatu of blessed memory went to the United Nations in 1995, they were informed that as far as the United Nations is concerned, the Southern Cameroons had been granted independence and empowered to go negotiate a union treaty. So whatever happened, what do you say to that? Dr. Ndi, if you're talking, we are not getting you. You are muted.
okay. Southern Cameroons acquired her independence by joining, right? Which means they would get independence and they will join. That was the message. And so when they got independence, they were not, they started negotiating as an independent state, because the UN was very clear that they would negotiate as equal parties. They would negotiate as on equal status. There was not going to be somebody who would be like a minority and somebody a majority or whatever. They were going to negotiate as states, because we have states of different sizes, nations, but they are states and they are independent. So they were going to negotiate on that basis. But unfortunately, that did not happen. And that is the basis of the problems we're having, because there was no union treaty that was really negotiated to satisfy the aspirations of all of the two parties that were going to come together. So that is a problem.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ndi. I will, we will take a little break and move on, say something else, then we will come back to the subject matter in just a while. But before we actually get this break on another subject matter, I want to say this, that it is important for the people to know that the chronology of events is not erroneous. First, on February 11, 1961, the United Nations supervises a referendum in the Southern Cameroons, which allows the people to determine whether they want to empower, that was a plebiscite, I beg your pardon, 1961, empower the people, to empower the government, which will eventually negotiate a union treaty with either Nigeria or Cameroon, which are already independent states. This should be clear. This is what happens in 1961.
That is very clear.
Yes. I'm saying this because, it should help us to avoid any kind of ambiguity and confusion on this.
Yes.
Number one, on February 11, the plebiscite was to empower the government of the Southern Cameroons to eventually negotiate with either Nigeria or the Republic of Cameroon, which were already independent. And so, after the plebiscite, where the people empower the Foncha government to negotiate with the government of La République du Cameroun, the United Nations moved to the next stage with the notion that only governments get into union treaties with governments. For that reason, the United Nations in April now organizes a vote for the independence of the Southern Cameroons. This should be clear. And overwhelmingly, the members of the General Assembly voted in favor of the independence of the Southern Cameroons. France leads La République du Cameroun, and all French-speaking countries in Africa, except Mali, to vote against the independence of the Southern Cameroons. Now, take note of this. If the United Nations voted against independence for Southern Cameroons, it would have meant simply that they were giving La République du Cameroun the chance to simply annex the Southern Cameroons. But hell no, that independence vote is taken, and the Southern Cameroons on April 21, 1961 is an independent state, empowered therefore to go negotiate a treaty of union with La République du Cameroun that must be sealed before October 1, when the UN and the British would walk out of the Southern Cameroons, allowing them to now get into this union that would have been negotiated with La République du Cameroun. But hell no, something happened along the line, and that is where I come back to you, Dr. Ndi, just before we take this break.
I want to make this very clear. You know, the British government, when they were handing over, when the trusteeship was ending, they did something which would be contrary to, which would be defeating their role they had to play trusteeship, because they handed the instruments of power rather to La République, which is unfortunate. And that is why we're saying all of these things were moving down in a chronology. But the British, when they were handing over the instruments of power on October, October 1st, I think they handed them rather to not to Foncha, who was, the representative of the people, or the representative leader of the Southern Cameroons, which is defeating the very fact they were as a trusteeship, and they started as a mandate to trusteeship to prepare a people to become independent. That is the controversy, and that is where the British have the blame. Or when Southern Cameroonians look back, they see the British as also trying to, not respecting some of the things that the UN had specified very clearly. Because the UN, what you are describing here, from February right down to was done by the UN. Was what the UN was, and the British were doing everything on behalf of the UN. And
well,
so,
Dr. Ndi,
yes,
I'd like to point out here that there's the documented evidence, and I suppose that you and I will have another opportunity on this program to delve specifically into that existing evidence that the British had negotiated under the table deals with France prior to October 1, ceding the Southern Cameroons to France, arranging how the Southern Cameroonians were going to be assimilated, because there are successive letters over the years, diplomatic letters between the British and the French, talking about the advance or the progress of the process of assimilation of the people of the Southern Cameroons into La République du Cameroun. So while the people of the Southern Cameroons felt that they were getting into an open union, the two colonial powers, France and Britain, had already negotiated under the table deals. The people of the Southern Cameroons did not know that they were actually, I should use the right word, virtually sold into slavery to France through La République du Cameroun, while the French, therefore, aware of this, were present with Ahidjo at all times in the entire process, in Fumban, in Bamenda, everywhere, to make sure that this objective is attained, and that a clear chronology is put in place on how gradually the Southern Cameroons will disappear and cease to exist as the Southern Cameroons and simply become part and parcel of La République du Cameroun, with French forced upon the people of the Southern Cameroons. I suppose you remember the small historical expression of un petit don de la reine.
Okay, that really even reinforces what I was saying, that we don't understand the attitude of the British publicly. But these are issues that are coming up, and these are historical issues that are coming up that should inform and that should make us understand the situation, how challenging the situation was for leadership of the Southern Cameroons at the time. Because we've taken for granted the fact that they went through very difficult circumstances, and some of the things they did were not really because they would have done them. but they did some of these things because they were pressured to do some of these things. So we should appreciate the context within which they were working, and we should appreciate the efforts they made, because I would like to tell you, when they were getting out of the eastern region of Nigeria, it was just because they felt that their autonomy as a unit was being compromised in the eastern region, and that is why they were given a quasi-federal status. That's why they were given. And they came and they enjoyed that status for 7 years. I want to even come back to 1914, between 1914 and 16, to tell you that there was an attempted union between the French and the English portions in 1914 called the Condominion. There was a combined, or there was a joint leadership of Cameroon at that time when it was taken from the Germans, and that failed. It failed, which is indication that, you know, it's really very, very difficult to blend these two. It's like trying to mix petrol and water, because these are people who have been socialized, different views, cultural views, different social views, who think differently, and it's really difficult, if we are not very careful, to mix them. Rather, we should, you know, organize structures that will permit each of them to express themselves and to live conveniently with the value systems that they've come up with. So this project of trying to mix started even as far back as 1914 with condominium, and not work. So I want to say all of these things to say that the leadership has always been very conscious about the uniqueness of the Southern Cameroons. From 54 to 1961, they were still fighting, and to presently, they fought very hard, and they've been fighting to see that our uniqueness, or the uniqueness of Southern Cameroons, is not compromised.
Okay, Dr. Ndi, like I said, we will move. We will take just a little break to say something else, but it is not unrelated. But before we get to that, I just want to make this comment again, that first, note this: the British, at the time when they traded us off to France through La République du Cameroun, the notion was that the Southern Cameroons was poor, that we did not have resources enough to sustain us, and that if the Southern Cameroons were allowed to be independent, the people would depend on the British taxpayers' money for the exercise of governance, development, and everything. So the British felt that there were no resources at all in the Southern Cameroons for the Southern Cameroons to self-sustain as a country. And they didn't want any of this, or they didn't want any of our trouble, or any having to, you know, spend any resources on helping the Southern Cameroons. But today, the same British are supporting an argument that if the Southern Cameroons becomes independent, La République du Cameroun will suffer enormously, because at least 60% of the GDP of the entire country is from the Southern Cameroons. What a paradox. First, we are denied. First we are denied independence because we will not have resources to self-sustain. Then next, we are again being told we cannot be independent because we are the breadbasket.
Yeah, that is why I said, you know, the main factor that decided on the two questions that were to be put to Southern Cameroonians was not the economic argument. It was not because Southern Cameroon was poor. The main argument was the politics that was happening in Europe between the West and the East. And the feeling, as I expressed, was that since Southern Cameroon was harboring some people who had fled from East Cameroon into Southern Cameroon, some UPC militants who were considered as communists, then Southern Cameroon was sympathetic to the communist philosophy, and if they were granted independence on their own, they would definitely fall towards communism. That was the main argument, not even the economic argument. And so the economic argument was just a way of, like, you know, people say normally when you want to kill a dog, you give it a bad name. That exactly is what the British did. But the fundamental reason was that they didn't want the Southern Cameroons, or they felt that the Southern Cameroons would fall under communist rule. And one of the reasons why, you know, the French were so eager for this union was because they also felt that, they would have access to southern Cameroons when we become, a federation. They would have access to southern Cameroon, and they will be able to track, some of these UPC nationalist leaders who were in southern Cameroons. So it was, from the French perspective, a way of accessing the UPC militants who were in southern Cameroons and to deal with them. And that is why, when they were sufficiently satisfied that they had dealt with this challenge from the UPC, they brought up the project of 1972, because they had used the southern Cameroons to achieve what they wanted.
Okay,
So they
Dr.
brought up the project.
We will come
Yes.
back to the 1972. So we are just about 16 minutes to the end of our program. I've said often that La République du Cameroon is not interested in the people of the southern Cameroons. They are only interested in our resources. Of course, they are a French proxy. France has never been interested in its colonists or in its colonies, in the people in its colonies. It's always been interested in the resources found in the colonies, located in the colonies. So La République du Cameroon, as the proxy of France, is only interested in the southern Cameroons because of our resources. And that is why, by day and by night, even with the conflict raging on, they prove to us that that is what brought them. Just watch this short video.
Coming latest April 9, 2021, at the conference hall of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, CONAC in Yaoundé, where those claiming ownership of the structure will prove to the Anti-Corruption Commission how they acquired the land to build. They are a total of 14 sites with approximately 8,000 plus houses already planted on them. In a press release dated 19 March 2021, the chairman of CONAC, Reverend Dr. J. Dening Masigam, spelled out that all those occupying this site, from Boya Station, Federal's Quarters, GRA, Clark's Quarters, Lower Farms, Upper Farms, Boya Fuel Plantation, Presidential Residence Land, Bostal Institute, Guest House, Wadas Barracks, Boya Regional Hospital Land, and the government practicing school Moliko Boya should come along with the following document. 1. Attribution Act of the land. 2. Land Certificate. 3. Building Permit. And 4. Receipt of the payment of a transaction through auction sales or by private treaty at the Divisional Land Revenue Collector of Fako Division.
Personally, I've addressed at least 90% of my petitions to government about land grabbing in Fako. I've copied CONAC.
And to Barrister Eko Mengonge, CONAC has taken the right step.
So if CONAC is coming in to try to correct this, they have 100% of my support and the support of the people of Fako especially.
But reminded this Cameroon Anti-Corruption Commission that the land in question is not state land.
There has been a mistaken impression all along, especially in Fako, that all land in Fako is state land. That is false. I can tell you that as far as 1959, the British government was paying rents to the Joint Council, Bakri Council of Victoria and Boya Council, which consisted Manga Williams and Chief Gevash Osendeli. They're paying rents over all the lands that were occupied by government. I'm talking about the GRA, the class quarters, the federal quarter. I don't know if it existed then. We had all these government station buildings. The British government used to pay rents to the traditional council on this land. Do you know why? Because it was not owned by the government. In fact, there was no Cameroon government as we know it today before 1961. So who owned this land before then? So let us be clear, the government doesn't own land in Fako except land that it has legally expropriated. And the process of expropriation requires the government to pay compensation to the owners of the land. The owners of the land existed here before the government of Cameroon came into being.
This legal mind also said the Cameroon government still has a window of opportunity to right the wrongs before things spill out.
A horrible conflict brewing in the making. Because it will get to a point where our young Fako boys and girls will not have a place to build their houses, they will not have a place to farm, they will not have jobs as they do not have now, and they'll be surrounded by strangers, all who are occupying these positions, who have occupied their lands through illegal process of acquisition because they had the power. And there'll be very serious conflict in the brewing. I had the occasion to tell the Minister of Lands recently, in Yaoundé, through his Secretary General, that if this situation is not stemmed early, we should have a worse conflict within FACO than what is happening in the whole North and Southwest province.
April 9.
So, this is a dicey situation out there, but it is not it's not strange, because those, like you heard in that report and listen to Barrister Ngongi, those who own 90% of this land are citizens of La République du Cameroon. Why? Because systematically they are in charge of the administration in FACO from time immemorial. The governor, the senior divisional officer, the divisional officer, the divisional delegate of lands and of lands, and all of this, consequent on the fact that they have all the powers, so they get all this land for themselves. Threaten chiefs here and there and all whatnot. And Dr. Ndi, I'm coming to you for a comment, because the same situation is happening in Bamenda as we speak, where the layout, the GRA upstation, both the new layout and the old one, pieces of land already handed out to citizens of the southern Cameroons in Bamenda are being confiscated afresh now by the senior divisional officer, who of course is La République du Cameroon citizen, the governor, who is La République du Cameroon citizen, the divisional delegate of lands, La République du Cameroon citizen. That entire chain, at this point in time that we speak, I hear there is an outcry in Bamenda, because yesterday I was receiving reports on my program that it got so bad that some of the people were inviting Amber Boys into the show to target the families of those who will get their pieces of land, or the Francophones who will be given their land. So they wanted to get onto my program, and I said, no, this program doesn't entertain such, calls or threats on the lives of people, but it is a malaise. And Dr. Ndi, I want to get your comment on this.
Yes, I think this is not even strange to me, because we kind of studied something. I did some research on when the government wanted to privatize the CDC, and there was something like trying to give back land to the natives, and when this land was being given out to the natives, this land was grabbed, by people who were not natives and who had come to settle in the area. So there's a lot of tension around that. And so it just tells you, they're coming to grab. Like you said, the policy has been coming down there to grab. So they have all the power. They've been given the power to come grab. So that is just what is happening. Like you said, in upstation, they are the ones who allocate, or who allocate, this land to people, and they allocate to themselves and want to amass land in those areas where they are working, and deprive the indigenous people of that land, which is not only a source of subsistence, which is also to which they are historically. This is going to bring about an even worse crisis.
Yeah, it's going to open a new front.
It's
altogether.
going to open a new chapter in what is going on. When I look at this, when I analyze personally, I'm just looking at the situation that is happening. I'm seeing how there is a systematic destruction and weakening of the people of southern Cameroons by what is happening. Because the more it continues the more it continues, the more efforts they are making to weaken, so that the people become as weak not to be able to sustain what is going on and be subjected. And that's which is unfortunate, which I foresee. If something is not done, that is where we're going.
Yes, I received a couple of calls from a number of calls from some women, some families, with a lot of wailing. One particular woman was explaining to me on phone when she wanted to be part of this program, how she spent 17 million on her piece of land. She had gone through the entire process with the administration, bribing a lot along the way, because they will always put roadblocks to collect money. And she's gone as far as getting a land certificate already, dispatched from Yaoundé just for the stuff to be filled in a booklet and handed over to her. That all of these people have already gone through what the auction sales, paid money into the state treasury, and set their papers for the processing of land titles through the ministry in Yaoundé. Come to imagine, there's a ministry in Yaoundé that will determine how you own land in Bamenda. And then this conflict breaks out. It breaks out, and the administration is now hanging on a certain clause that if you had not developed your land within 3 years of it being attributed to you, they can reattribute it, even if you had paid money into the government coffers. Where do they get the means or the strength to be constructing during a war?
What I will tell you about this is that when I was in Cameroon, we as civil society, we came up with a program to see how we would secure lands of people who have been resident on their pieces of land for a very long time. We tried to do that by saying the government could give titles to villages, to communities living on those pieces of land, even before the independence of Cameroon. We viewed very strongly that if that protection was not given to our villages, then land grabbers would soon grab all of our village lands and our people would be left with nothing. But of course, as you would have it, since it was kind of blocking the opportunity for those land grabbers to grab, that motion that they were proposing was blocked. And so
which is exactly
the lands,
why
the village,
on the way they are going
the
now.
villages that we are, the villages from where we come, it's considered that the land that they occupy is government land. So they can come into it and exploit it.
We just heard Barrister Ngongi tell us plainly that there was no government before 1961, no government of Cameroon before 1961. And so the government cannot claim to own this land unless they have actually expropriated this land. As I'm talking right now, the report I have is that there's a lady there in Bamenda who has seen her land seized from her and handed over to the current senior divisional officer from Ngo-Ketunjia, the current colonial senior divisional officer from Ngo-Ketunjia, that her land has been seized and handed over to him, even after she spent a lot of money to pay everything the government wanted. How then do you expect the people to be peaceful?
So that is why we as civil society at the time when I was in Cameroon, we were talking in terms of a law on land, not ordinances, because Cameroon right up to now has an ordinance on land. It doesn't have a law on land, and we're proposing a law which would kind of guarantee land for our villages. The lands that our villages are occupying should be titled. If the state wants to think that all land should be titled, those lands should be titled for those, so that they have authority over those lands, so that nobody comes to grab these lands from them. But unfortunately, we were not able to carry this bill to the end because of resistance from the very people who come to grab land and who come to deprive our people of the source of livelihood. And this is trying to impoverish people, probably to be able to govern them. That is the strategy which is being put in place by those who lead.
Thank you very much, Dr. Z, for your comment. We are 3 minutes away from the end of our program. I'd like us to go back to our main issue of discussion, and so that you say your concluding words on the program. So what would you say to those who, from the viewpoint of history, following what we have been discussing on this program today, hold that there is therefore no union existing between La République du Cameroun and the people of the Southern Cameroons, because the plebiscite of 1961 was not a referendum, which means the people had not voted as a decision to join La République du Cameroun, but voted to empower the frontier government to negotiate for a union treaty that would eventually lead into joining La République du Cameroun. And then in the absence of any such treaty of union, there has really never been a union between La République du Cameroun and the people of the Southern Cameroons. Now what happened is rape, is annexation. What do you say to this? That's your last comment on the program.
What I would like to say from the evidence of history is that there would have been a process. It was a process trying to negotiate a union. And it started in Fumba. English speaking, the delegation of Southern Cameroons presented their points. They presented what they felt could get into that union, that treaty of union. Not everything about what they presented was taken on board, and they were not even there when this treaty of union, the so-called, federal constitution, was voted by the parliament of of the state of East Cameroon. They were not even there.
Just a second. The treaty of the constitution of La République du Cameroun could not replace a union treaty.
It could not replace. That's what I'm saying. It integrated some aspects of the points that the Southern Cameroon's delegation had brought to the table, and that's why we have this issue of the form of state. The form of state was brought in by Southern Cameroons. The question of form of state and federation, and they brought this issue because they know and they knew that these two cultures and that these two historic entities could not really just merge. It would mean one, trying to, absorb the other if the two were allowed to merge. They knew this, and that's why they brought in this issue of a federation. And they said it was only going to be changed with a consensus, that there was going to be a consensus before anything about structure is talked about. It's changed. But unfortunately, what happened? Was there any discussion in 1972 before the structure was changed? I mean, the people of Southern Cameroons, were helpless in a situation where a whole country had to vote, to change the structure of state, when they were the people who brought up this idea.
But that referendum, Dr. Ndi, is still said to have been illegal because that constitutional provision that you are talking about said the form of the state was inviolable.
It was inviolable.
Yes, that it could not, that it could never change. That one was that it was sacrosanct, could not change. So that referendum of 1972 itself was illegal.
It was, because it had just violated what they agreed. I mean, the only thing that they took out of what the delegation, the leadership of Southern Cameroon brought was taken off in 1972. That is the main thing that they brought, and which protected them, and which protected the legacy they were bringing into the union, was taken off in 1972. And so they didn't have any grounds again, because they were completely helpless after 1972, because they had no basis, and all the arguments that they had brought to the table were completely, dismissed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndi. Our time is up. I really have wished for us to, stay longer, but time is time on, on broadcast. So we will have another opportunity to pick up from here, because we need to talk about a lot of issues, and including even the notion of whether there needs to be a referendum again or not, and who will vote in that referendum, because there's a lot of confusion and a lot of misconceptions in the minds, especially of, the people of La République du Cameroun, in the minds of our neighbors. So there's a lot of confusion at that point. So thank you very much, Dr. Ndi, for making it to the program.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be, on your program. And if that would help to, solve the problems that we're having in Cameroon, of course, I would be ready to give a contribution so that we solve our problems, and so that, the people in Cameroon can, come back to normal life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndi, Dr. Richard Tanto Ndi. Thank you so much for your time. And my people of the Southern Cameroons, this is where we draw the curtains on this program today. But before I go, I must say this. You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. Knowing the history of the Southern Cameroons, as it were, is fundamental in enabling us to push through with our quest for total liberation, for absolute independence. I like to say it always, as the late Christian Cardinal Toomey had the habit of saying when he was referring to the survey he conducted in the Southern Cameroons. My people of the Southern Cameroons, historical evidence calls on us to, as one people, continue to be resilient, steadfast, determined, focused, and build cohesion together until we attain our objective. Our cause is a just cause. That is why I like us to end with this quote from the former US First Lady, Michelle Obama, who says, failure is an important part of your growth and developing resilience. So failure needs to you growing and building resilience so that you are able to attain your objective. So failure in itself is not a problem. We have had a number of instances where we think we were doing it right, but we had done it wrong. We have had a number of instances where we really felt that, oh, things are really, that these people are so bad that they can't be redeemed. Oh, yes, they can be redeemed. Because failure is an important part of our growth, and it is the foundation of our resilience. So let us build on our determination to attain this freedom by recognizing that as humans, we will have instances where we fail. But those failures should serve as lessons that we build on to strengthen our resilience and our focus on the prize, on the objective, which is total and absolute independence. My people of the Southern Cameroons, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure, always really, sharing with you every Saturday when it is 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you.